Welcome to the Connection Podcast. I am Lauren Dry, also known as the Connection Catalyst. Connection and this podcast for me is personal. As a driven professional, I found myself an expert in all things work and business, but it was at home that I really needed clarity and ease. After finally finding it one marriage breakdown and one marriage reset later, and finally discovering what really works to have connection in modern relationships, using science, simplicity and soul, our signature program Rise into Regulation was born that's giving so many others in modern driven relationships back clarity and ease for good. On the podcast today, we're going to dive deep together on all things relationships, business, identity and leadership. And clarity and ease is at the heart of it all, and we are so happy to be with you so that you can have what you need in connection, mind, body and soul too. Today we are going to begin the Rewiring Series, a 4-part podcast series that covers why emotionally intelligent and high-functioning people still repeat really painful patterns, whether they're aware of them or not, how rewiring actually happens in the moment, not just a fancy TikTok phrase that paints a glowy picture that maybe might happen for some people, but that doesn't tangibly make sense for others. We're going to cover how to tell the difference between intuition, trauma patterns, and relationship potential, as well as what becomes possible when survival mode starts to downregulate and we start to be able to make really conscious and grounded decisions, and also be able to receive support without our trauma patterns getting in the way. In the first episode of the Rewiring series, what we're going to start with is what rewiring actually means. Because we throw around the word rewiring like it's some kind of personality upgrade or update. But what it really is a lot more practical. It's a lot more grounded in how your life looks like when you finally get to operate from the baseline that you were always meant to, without hidden or obvious trauma patterns getting in the way. And that working properly does look a little bit less glamorous than, some big shiny light that comes down from above and immediately clicks things into a completely different trajectory. The way that proper rewiring begins is that it starts in really small moments. So things like not getting cold, not spiraling, not abandoning yourself or even the other person anytime there's a disagreement or a debate or something small or large happens. You're able to show up for yourself, most importantly, and then have clarity about what's happening. It also looks like not overperforming or overcompensating or being hypervigilant, and sometimes even doing the work for two people just so that you can feel safe. It also looks like not really needing to have a check on all the time of the temperature of the house, of people's moods and how things are going and what's happening for everyone else at any moment of the day, so that you can feel a sense of security and finally be able to relax, because you mentally put everyone in a box and you have that predictability element covered, instead of a deep sense of security that you can confidently manage anything that comes up. And also you have deep confidence around the potential of the relationship, the challenges in the relationship, and your capacity within that from a deep foundational level, so that nothing really takes you off guard. You simply know that anything unpredictable that could happen is something that is within your values and is within the capacity of you as an individual and the relationship together to be able to navigate well. When we don't have this, so if you are curious about what rewiring actually is and whether this is something that might be the right thing for this season of your life, you will probably be someone who has a really high level of resentment. Probably because you're the one carrying the load in the relationship. You're always really emotionally aware. You're always checking in, doing some kind of new tool or reading a new self-help book. And you're feeling really frustrated that you're the one in it alone. Or you're really hyper competent and resilient in so many other areas of your life, but the unpredictability that you feel at home is starting to feel really corrosive to your body and to your ability to enjoy other things outside of the home, because you don't feel that level of safety at home. You might use productivity or even self-development to avoid feeling vulnerable because you really have an intellectual handle on what's going on, but being in your body and really feeling things and having that deep level of security doesn't feel accessible at the moment. And you might even really struggle to soften and slow down and deeply connect with people because your body might be associating that softness, or, the tagline on TikTok at the moment is femininity, with a loss of control. And you might have been in situations in the past where really that has been justified. And when you've tried to soften and you've tried to get in your feminine, if you're a woman, this also does apply to men, where that vulnerability and that softness has cost you. And now it does feel dangerous to relax and allow support to even be possible. So if you really relate to any of that, then what we need to talk about first of all is why knowing better, maybe having a ton of information on the brain, maybe being in therapy for 20, 25 years on and off, either on your own or in the marriage itself, and really having a handle on everything that's happened in your childhood, in the patterns of the relationship, is really not the same thing as feeling safe enough and secure enough and grounded enough to be able to respond in a different way, not necessarily in a way that means abandoning yourself and feeling like you may even need to be some kind of a doormat in order to make the relationship work, or going the opposite direction and feeling like you really need to hold your hard lines and shut people out or you're going to be hurt. And that's where this huge tug of war can often come from for so many people, of the daily or weekly or monthly spiral between do I stay or do I go, and both options really not feeling like they are getting you that deep rest and that clarity and that ease that you really need. So let's talk about why we make the decisions that we do, even if they don't serve us well. And these decisions can be anything from, why did I choose the person that I'm married to? Why do my relationships seem to follow the same patterns, whether it's a friendship or a relationship or a family connection? Why am I reactive when I want to be really grounded and conscious and be the one who can navigate any unpredictability or uncertainty with a lot of grace and a lot of confidence, and just be that person that you meet sometimes who seems like everything is water off their back and they seem to be able to shake things off, and the world seems to shift around them in a way that seems like everything's easy and life serves them, so to speak. The thing is, insight does not automatically reset or rewire the programming that creates these decision-making pathways underneath the surface, whether it's a big decision or a small decision. So more learning and more knowledge doesn't support us at the root, which is why you may have a friend or a friend of a friend, or you may even be a psychologist yourself and feel like you have master's degrees on the brain and trauma patterns and communication, but it's just not serving you in your own personal relationship. This is because research suggests that about 95% of behavior, especially in connection and in relationships, is unconscious and comes from an autopilot place. What this means is that the body will react to situations in front of you in your life, in your relationships, before your conscious logic can catch up, which is why shame spirals happen when perhaps you might lose your temper or you make a decision that you don't feel comfortable with. Or later, after a conversation, you may think of all the perfect things that you wish you would have said, but in the moment, it feels impossible to access. This is because so much of our decisions, so many outcomes that happen in our life, they are formed through the programming that is set in our unconscious mind. This is probably why you have a really confident understanding of your attachment style. But still, in the moment, if you resonate with anxious attachment style, you might over explain yourself or get really assertive or go into an anxiety spiral, even though you know you shouldn't. Or if you're an avoidant, you might shut down and pull away and feel deeply unsafe and misjudged and criticized, even though you've learnt everything about avoidant attachment style and you really don't want to behave that way. You want to stay. You want to be able to be deeply secure and have safe boundaries, but also be able to connect at the same time. It might also be why you are really, really good at explaining your emotions, but still struggle to stay present and in the moment during a conversation. It also might be why it can be confusing to figure out whether you are just emotionally exhausted or really, really sure that the relationship is over. The thing is, the body reacts much faster than our conscious mind and our logical brain can comprehend. It's a snail against a rabbit situation. We can educate and give the snail as much information as possible and as necessary, with the snail being our conscious and logical mind. But the rabbit is the one that's going to get to the destination first. It's the one that's going to make the choice. It's the one that's going to rule the relationship and rule the outcomes of our lives. With that rabbit being our unconscious hidden patterns and our programming that's ruling 95% of our mind and our body. So, if awareness and logic and education alone doesn't really change our patterns, what actually does? The real rewiring framework that we absolutely need to properly change the future of our relationship and any relationship in our future, whether it's a romantic relationship or a marriage, and even our parenting, if we want to break some of those cycles that we've inherited around losing our temper or not having that deep connection, not being able to play. The real rewiring framework that we absolutely need consists of 3 pillars. On the surface, these pillars look like mind, body, and soul, but so often the majority of rewiring work really just focuses on that first pillar of the mind. And it's why so many people can study the brain, study communication patterns for years, decades, and still not feel a true sense of rewiring and resetting of the patterns in their relationship. Because, yes, the mind is one of 3 essential pillars, but it's what we would call the scaffolding that allows the rest of the framework to be useful and operational. And the kind of scaffolding and mind framework that you really need is a combination of awareness and communication. So, this consists of having a framework that, first of all, recognizes the pattern, second of all, identifies your triggers, and third of all, understands the relationship dynamic, not only your own relationship dynamics, but what's happening between you two, without pointing the finger and just being able to see the other person's side of the street without realizing where these unconscious patterns can feed off each other. So, the mind framework that you need, when you have that in order and you have simplicity back around awareness and communication, what you're going to be able to do is realize that the argument that you're having or the discussion with your co-parent or your partner is not just about logistics. It's not about when they should be home from work or the amount of deadlines that you need to meet or the way that you each parent. It's actually about emotional disconnection or a values mismatch. It's noticing that you are gathering evidence to win your case instead of actually seeking repair, connection, and a raising of the standard of the relationship so that you both feel more safe and secure after the discussion than before. It can be recognizing when your clarity seeking is actually just anxiety. And it's knowing that when you're hearing the words, I'm tired, it's 100% not a rejection versus, hey, there may be some intuitive parts to this statement that are really overwhelming for me right now. And I trust my intuition, so I'm going to create space to have that conversation versus, hey, yeah, maybe we're actually both tired and I'm starting to read into this way more than there actually is. All this awareness is really, really important, but awareness explains the pattern that's happening underneath. It doesn't automatically stop it. So we need the other 2 pillars. We need the body and the soul, and we'll cover them next. The second pillar of the framework for rewiring requires that we have nervous system regulation. So this is what the body pillar is all about. This is where we gain tools to feel safe enough to interrupt that autopilot mechanism. The thing is, our nervous system takes information from our amygdala. So the amygdala, they're 2 almond-shaped organs at the base of the brain that are connected to our sympathetic nervous system, our danger nervous system, our survival nervous system. And the thing is, these 2 almond-shaped organs, they operate at twice the speed as the rest of the brain. So their job is to scan for danger. The thing is, they just don't know the difference between danger being a sigh, an eye roll, and a clenched jaw being danger versus an actual real life dangerous situation like your house being on fire. So it's not very smart. And when this part of the brain gets activated, it can take 20 minutes for the hormones that are released and those body processes to come out of our system properly so we can make conscious choices again. So we do need nervous system regulation tools to be able to access any of the learnings that we are finding in that first pillar of mind. Otherwise, what we have is a ton of really cool information and facts that are useless to us in the middle of a conversation where things get heated. Because when the nervous system becomes dysregulated, our threat detection increases, our prefrontal cortex, where we are absorbing all of this useful information, just goes offline or at least becomes a lot less active. And the flexibility that we have to be able to determine what's real, what's true, what's possible, what's impossible, it really drops. And we kick into black and white thinking, which removes our ability to see what's actually possible in the relationship and in a conversation at all. You basically just lose access to your wisest self, the wisest version of you. So, when your nervous system is in chaos and that body pillar isn't aligned, what you'll do is you will probably monitor everyone's mood before you allow yourself to relax at all. You need to have a catalog of how things are going with your kids, how things are going with your husband, how things are going with even people outside of your home. And you're going to feel maybe a really heightened level of anxiety around anything to do with work as well. It's going to feel almost like a relief being able to hyper manage things at your work because at least there's logic there and not complicated emotions. You're going to struggle to receive support, even if it's not asked for, and you're going to struggle with micromanaging even the support that you do get. You might numb out during really, really hard conversations or become really, really controlling when things get murky or messy or uncertain. Or you might actually even, not intentionally, but you might need conflict to feel emotionally engaged, to be able to feel like there's authenticity at the table, to be able to have that security that the person that you're having a conversation with isn't masking. Or, you might actually unconsciously escalate things because calm feels unfamiliar and scary because you're not sure what's on the other side. And it may even be more disappointing for calm to disappear than for there to be conflict in the first place that at least leaves all the cards on the table, so to speak. Basically, you can't access secure connection and get your needs met from a full survival mode because chronic stress and our body being in that survival state narrows our perspective. It's like having blinkers on. And from that place, our nervous system is going to prioritize protection over connection. And we're not going to be able to see clearly what's happening with other people or even with ourselves. The third pillar that you need in the rewiring framework is, it's a soul label. So mind, body, soul. But what that really means is unconscious rewiring and parts integration. So this is understanding which part of us is in control of the dynamic and making sure we have that integration. So this isn't shadow work. This isn't inner child work. This is really understanding and having a deep and secure relationship with all parts of ourselves so that shame, regret, resentment, and hypervigilance isn't in charge of our body and our relationships. And we have a really conscious awareness of when maybe we're cycling through those parts of ourselves and we gain the ability to partner with them so that we can gain the information that we need in situations like that and then move into conscious decision making because we're no longer feeling that push and that pull and that competition between our protector part and perhaps our mask. So this is where we experience repair between the parts of ourselves that maybe felt hyper independent and maybe even learned that needing people and being vulnerable was humiliating or weak in some way, and the overachieving part that constantly is trying to become enough for connection or is constantly fighting against that sneaky voice that tells you that you're too much. Or even the part of you that's addicted to feeling like you need to earn love without really being aware of it through being really, really useful. Now, our brain, what it actually does is prioritize familiarity over happiness. So even if these patterns and these cycles and these push and pulls in between ourselves, they don't make us happy and they create a lot of anxiety, a lot of frustration, a lot of disconnection, our hidden patterns will choose them a million times over without a proper reset because our brain will choose familiarity over happiness. These patterns, they used to be protective. They served a purpose for us at some point in our life. It may be something that happened or a repeated situation that occurred where these patterns were useful really, really early on in our lives, way back before we can remember. The thing to know, though, is that they did serve a purpose. Now, as grown adults trying to raise children of our own and have really secure and productive relationships, these patterns are not going to be effective or productive anymore. In fact, they're probably destructive at this stage of life. But until we give them something to be replaced with, our body won't let them go. And it does that out of love. It does that out of care. So we have to understand and give ourselves a lot of compassion and grace in order to start using tools that allow that reset to happen. This is why people can desperately want connection and desperately want it to be healthy connection and desperately want to show up as their best selves and desperately want to have a deep and secure relationship and have a lot of clarity around what is the other person's responsibility versus what's theirs, while really at the same time sabotaging it without meaning to, whether it's through the perceptions of what's going on or the way that they're showing up or through the behaviors that they accept. So the way that we take this 3-pillar framework and actually get it to start working is by harnessing neuroplasticity, harnessing the way that our brains actually work and operate on a programming level, on a hormonal level. And we can create new neural pathways and new ways to behave that are really reflexive, really habit based, really simple, and really accessible when we blend these 3 steps: 1, repetition; 2, emotional relevance; and 3, lived experience. So, not just learning about something, but really living it. And what this looks like when it works is really just staying emotionally in the moment instead of withdrawing or running away or asking for something directly without feeling like you need to over justify yourself, even if it's something like a date night, or getting past and getting through a really difficult conversation without it being an emotional catastrophe. It also means you get to be one of those really cool people who stays connected and grounded and secure and confident, even when things are uncomfortable and it's a tough conversation or an uncertain situation, because you don't feel like you have to escape by shutting down or pushing someone away or spiraling. What's most important to remember is that our brain really does trust lived experiences more than intellectual oversight. So, being in situations and experiencing new processes and tools and shifts in real time that don't feel threatening to the nervous system, the thing is, the brain trusts lived experiences more than it does intellectual insight. So, what that means is that we have the capacity to create new neural pathways if our body trusts the process. If we can practice something in a really regulated state that feels repeatable even when you are, let's say, triggered. When you can practice something in a safe relationship where maybe there's not that level of intensity and it still works again in a situation at home where there is a lot of history and there are complex situations happening and deep emotions involved. If your brain starts to be able to trust lived experiences where these new tools and systems can support you to change things at the root consistently, then it's going to start relying much, much more on your instincts and trusting your instincts from a secure and grounded place with all of your parts at the table without feeling that need to push and pull and over explain, over justify, or shut down in order to experience protection over connection. And that part of your brain, that 95% that's in charge of your decisions and your behaviors and your relationships, that's ruled by your unconscious mind, that's going to start switching gears and allowing your reality to start becoming something new. So, rewiring really is nothing to do with becoming a different person. It's all about teaching your mind, your body, and your unconscious patterns that connection is no longer survival. Connection isn't something to be considered as a threat. It's not something that you don't deserve or that isn't possible or that is only practical at a surface level. It's something that is deeply nourishing and available to you because your entire system, every part of you deeply trusts that and is experiencing that every day. In the next episode of the Rewiring series, what we're going to cover together is what it looks like and the first steps to experiencing the moment where the pattern actually does break, and how to start beginning that process for yourself each day. If you have any questions about this or you'd like to go a little bit deeper, come hang out in the DMs over on Instagram at Lauren_Dry. And if you are ready to get started on this process yourself through a program like Rise into Regulation, head on over to the show notes where I will have a link for you to learn more and get started on the process that really resets your relationships and helps you to rewire at the root. I look forward to walking you through this process together in this 4-part series, and I'll see you in the next one. Big love.